Scott Whitley is a world-class bass player and educator. In his over 35-year career in the music industry, Scott has played with numerous different bands including The Animals and Big Country. He's played loads of different styles of music and he plays them all really, really well. Scott's also got a great YouTube channel that I urge you to check out. Please enjoy my interview with Scott Whitley. The role of the bass player is really complex because you're really in charge of a lot of the groove, but you're also an artist and you play a lot of solo stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you got into that kind of bass playing and your different roles within different bands that you've played with?
So I got the gig as a bass player in the school band because nobody else wanted to do it, right? How many times you heard that's
absolutely.
Right? Before that, I was playing a bit of drums. That's really what I wanted to do, is play drums. And a little bit of guitar, but you know, there was a guy at school who was much better at guitar and a drummer who wouldn't shift. so you know, I always had that kind of rhythm thing, you know, like I thought very rhythmically. So when I got into playing bass, like I say, I was playing 60 stuff, and then I saw Mark King, who's the bass player with Level 42, right? And my dad had recorded him live on the Prince's Trust concert, right? And he was doing his sort of slap thing, you know, like, you know, all these fast triplets, and I'm like, that's a bass, you know? It just kind of like really switched something on, and I was like, I'm going to pursue this thing.
A bass's role in a band, you've got a lot of that drive, but also you're in charge of the groove, really, where the drummer is punctuating the beats.
Yeah.
You're really swaying how the rhythm works as in the role of the bass player in that context, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. And I think good bass playing is extremely percussive, even if it maybe doesn't sound it, you know, it doesn't have to sound like that. I'm sure you share this belief. It's my belief that, you know, every musician in a band or you know, or an ensemble should really have impeccable timing or work to have impeccable timing. Yes. And there's this kind of like old school idea that it's the drummer's job to keep time, you know. And I've worked in many a band like that, you know, and it's flipping hard because you're pushing and pulling everybody, and it's hard work, you know. I don't know if you're playing a shuffle or something, you know, you're kind of like. That's why you see a lot of this, you know, because you're like, come on.
That's a visceral whole body movement, isn't it?
Yeah, every note, like just one note, there's so much value and focus on it, you know what I mean? Like the length of it. So I don't know, so if you were just playing like a 2, 3, boom, 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 boom. You know, you're really focusing on the rhythm, the length of the note. It's so important, you know, to get that groove, to hit that.
You're marking even notes that you're not playing certain notes. You're just going, don't. You sometimes can get pulled up on that. I mean, that's just the way I learned to play. A lot of the guys that I was listening to were doing that. The number of people that come to me and other bass tutors and whatever for help with slap, you know, the slap stuff, the funky stuff like Mark King does. And I think the reason is because it's very much about that sort of rhythm thing. It's more to do with the rhythm and playing with other musicians than it is the actual technique of slapping the bass.
You almost can't academically learn it.
Each note has a different value. It's not like you're slapping everything at the same volume. Let's talk about slap bass. And it's something you've become really well known for, is your ability to slap and all the different techniques associated with that. Can you give us a short kind of introduction to how you might slap the bass for those of us who don't really do? I mean, I do a little bit of it, but you know, and a couple of different, because you do some incredible like double slap techniques and stuff like that. Could you show us a little bit about that?
Of course, yeah. I'm glad we're sort of starting from the ground up. Basically, a slap, if you don't know, is where you strike the string and kind of bounce off. So you get this sort of, you know, so, and that in itself can be quite tricky. A lot of people find that they can't get it to bounce away and stuff. Look out for my slap bass course.
yeah, absolutely.
I actually go really into that, you know, because it is quite tricky. But the main thing is you've got to be very loose, you know, and just let it bounce off. I always kind of associate that with a sort of kick drum, because I've told you I think kind of rhythm, think drums, you know, and that is kind of like my kick drum, you know, right? And then the other main element, I would call it, is they call it the pull or the pop. Americans call it the pop. And that's where you hook your finger under like that, a bit like when you're picking, but so that it snaps back down, you know. And that can almost like act as like a snare drum, you know. So if you think, boom, 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 right, you're... And I've developed a lot of like my own ways of doing things over the years. I think that's one of the beauties of being, you know, coming up in that era. So what I did, I had all this kind of like repertoire of 60s stuff that I'd learned, right? And this is sacrilege, by the way. I'd just put like albums on of Beatles and whatever, and just try and slap my way through the stuff, right? Now, by the way, I knew this was completely inappropriate, would never have done it on a gig, right? But it was just a vehicle to instead of just being stuck like going like that. So what's from me to you or something like that?
Yeah, great.
Yeah. You know, I'd like go crazy, like trying to just get stuff in. I would never do that on a gig. This is not good bass playing, folks, at home.
Show us some, I mean, you're doing some stuff even already where you're doing mutes with the left hand and you're slapping. Show us some of those those kind of more advanced slap patterns that you might do.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, that is impressive, I'll give you that.
Yeah, it was like the holy grail. If you only could find out how Mark King was doing that. And maybe me, you know, I slowed down the video cassette recorder, you know, like, and so it was like playing a frame at a time, no sound. And I just watched his fingers, right? And it was like, right? I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like. So basically, the only real note that's sounding is that kind of leading pull, you know? So you get this.
So you've got 3 notes there.
But only one's really a note.
Yeah. So what? So how's that work? So you've got you're pulling the first note,
pulling the first, and then these are doing what I call a left-hand slap, right? Which is more than just muting the strings, because that would be like this.
It's coming down and hitting the string.
Yeah. Right, like this slap, it can be quite tricky because you get this like people get that kind of thing, or no sound at all, which does work. You still get, you know, but that kind of click is what you want. And then you just kind of hold it muted and
then you slap. The third note is you slapping with your thumb.
That's it. Now that's Mark King's thing. In context, I mean, you wouldn't want to use that throughout an entire piece, but just, you know, like or something like that, right?
Yeah, it punctuates.
You know, it works, yeah.
It's having that musicality of being able to incorporate it subtly into a piece of music.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of people don't realise is that you can incorporate slap into a regular plucking line. Like, for instance, one of my favourite tracks is Peg by Steely Dan that took Rainy. And I don't even think you'd necessarily notice that it's slapped, because it's not that overt slap sound.
Exactly. It's not kind of trying to make a point, it's just doing its job, isn't it? I mean, what is it? Something like that, you know. This tone that I'm producing at the minute is from, you know, a bass with round wound strings on and active circuitry and stuff like that. But it, you know, if I just kind of roll some of those highs off and stuff, I think it might be doing that. That's just from memory. I don't know if it's.
So in terms of setup, if someone's wanted to get into slap bass, round wound strings would be the logical way forward, wouldn't it, really?
For me, always round wound string. There's a certain life that round wound strings have. So, you know, if you play, you know, get that bell-like, you know, really, you know.
Yeah.
That's just a personal preference, right? You can emulate like other sounds enough, you know, well enough for like live work and even recording sessions and stuff by doing things like rolling all the highs off, putting it on the front pickup. You know, so if I have this bass and I was doing like a Motown thing, you know, it's not a bad sort of emulation of
absolutely.
flats on a P bass, you know.
And I mean, briefly, for those people who don't understand, round wound strings are like a guitar string where they're kind of rough to the touch, aren't they? They'll give you a lot more top end. Flat wound strings, they give you a much more kind of rounded sound, don't they? And it's more on the classic records of like James Jamerson used round or tape wound strings.
Yes,
The other thing that gets me about your playing, Scott, is you're a very melodic player, and you think of the bass in a different way than a lot of bass players that I've met.
Yeah.
And you think of it, you're playing chords, even or part chords. You're playing melodically. It's really interesting to me. Can you demonstrate some of that, and even tell me where that came into your orbit? Did you hear a bass player that played melodically, and that was an inspiration for you?
A lot of people know about Jaco Pastorius. He was known for playing fretless bass, which has a particular sound. But his work with Joni Mitchell, right? Yeah. Wow. Shadows and Light, you can find the video on YouTube or buy it, whatever. But his playing in that environment, right, just blew my mind. It changed everything, right?
Because he's playing the bass line and he's still holding the bass down, but he's also playing, like you say, he's playing around the vocal. He's playing lines like a sax player or even a steel player. Because it's a fretless instrument, so he's moving between things. He's playing harmonics.
Yeah. And it's just gorgeous. It's just beautiful music, right? It's like, it almost like removes the what instrument is it thing. It's just beautiful playing, beautiful music. And yet, like you say, somehow, almost, you know, because when you listen to some of the stuff he's doing, it's about as far from, say, James Jamerson, the rootsy stuff we were talking about earlier, you can get, and yet it's still functioning. It's still doing that. It's still supporting what she's doing. And it's kind of enhancing what she's doing. It's lifting it. It's decorating it.
I don't know if I've ever seen another bass player bend strings.
Well, I do like to think that it is maybe a slightly unique part of my playing. There are players that do it and stuff. But I try and use it in that way, like to create like beautiful sounding lines, you know.
But it's so different than doing... Like if you were to do a slide,
like
bending a note is such a different sound. Are there any particular ways that you would recommend that a bass player or any musician can open up the fretboard, you know, and understand, for instance, you know, like there's usually a large dusty section around here.
Yeah, there is. So the first thing is just to realise that if you just do that at the 12th fret, like imagine that's the end of the neck, you know, then it's just the same, obviously, isn't it? It's just this, you know, it's just this again. And straight away, that demystifies this. It's just a tiny little bass, if you understand what I mean. You know, so if you maybe even capo it, get a capo and put it there and just play around with it. And what you've got is a tiny little bass. Maybe play your regular bass lines and stuff in this area and just get used to how it sounds. Once you've kind of got a bit more comfortable with this area, maybe find some like backing tracks on, there's loads on YouTube and stuff. Not a bass backing track, you don't want a bassless track, right? Just for the sake of this exercise, you want there to be a bass player on the track, and then you just do the job of a solo lead guitar player, if you want to use that old-fashioned term, and just let the bass, just relax for a minute, because we don't get a chance to relax as bass players. You know, it's like, it's really interesting. You literally don't. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, you can't stop. You know, I just want to take a drink up, you know.
There's a lot of responsibility on a bass player. You've got a lot of jobs to do. I heard Sting talking about his role as a bass player and as a vocalist as well. And I know that's something that you have done and do a lot where you sing and play bass. You're really in charge of the harmony as well. Yeah. Because if you move a note, you know, say you're playing a D and then you suddenly play an F sharp.
Yeah.
Well, it can completely change the sound of a band, the style of music that you're playing, and that's all in your control. And that's a lot of responsibility to feel every night. How do you learn a song?
So what I'll do is the first time I listen to a tune that I'm learning, I'll probably close my eyes and I'll probably just get to know the thing a bit. Get to feel, is there how many choruses are there? Is there a middle eight? And just get a feel for the format. And I'll be kind of like listening for the movements of the chords. Then I'll probably listen to it again and try and write the chords out. Essentially, a lot of listening, not very much playing. I think it's important to learn the song, just like if you were learning to sing it, or like when people were at school and they were learning hymns or whatever,
Yeah, it's a case of getting the form of the song.
The form, yeah.
And the sounds of all those different chords and which one follows. I want to talk about your work with Big Country here. You're a fingerstyle bass player who's done a lot of 60s type stuff that I've seen you play, and I've obviously seen you do your slap stuff. But with Big Country, you had to learn a completely new style of playing bass.
Yeah.
And you had to learn, like I would with doing the Rooms of Fleetwood Mac gig that I do, you have to learn the parts really authentically as well, because people are expecting that and expecting that sound.
Yeah.
Was there a different process that you used for learning that stuff?
In a Big Country, the big, I think it's in E, isn't it? So I'm hearing. I'm hearing that kind of thing, just right, which is kind of what the drums are doing. And then I kind of like, hang on a minute, just had another listen. I'm like, no, he's not playing that, right? And it was like 2, 3, 4. Which is like, to me, like not the most intuitive. As it went on, that just more and more stuff unfolded. So what I'm saying is, in that instance, it wasn't enough to just use that process. It really was like you say, a note for note thing.
So Scott, we're both keen tone chasers. Where did you get into learning about the different tones that basses can produce, and maybe illustrate a couple of examples on this bass that you're playing at the moment?
Sure, yeah. Coming up as a player in the 80s, bass was really having its moment, like in the 80s.
Yeah.
Right?
Pino was earning his lifelong paycheck in the 80s, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's it, and he was playing with, if you listen to things like Don't Look Down by Go West, there were these sort of 2 or 3 different sounds. One sound you'd hear a lot was the soloed bridge pickup, so you get that. That sort of sound, right? That's that kind of bass sound and stuff for anybody out there that's interested. That was probably one of the main reasons I grew to like active basses, because if I just set this EQ flat so it's not doing anything, right? If I go from this pickup, I'm going to talk about that sound in a minute.
That's the next pickup, yeah.
Yeah, straight back to the bridge pickup. All the weight's gone, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I like that tone, that immediacy, but I want to thicken it back up, which doesn't obviously make it sound just like the other pickup. You've still got that pokey thing, but it's still more of a functional kind of deep sound, as opposed to without that little bump of EQ.
Oh, it's a huge change.
Yeah, the other sound you hear a lot, if you listen to players like Marcus Miller, George Anderson Jr., he was the bass player with Shack Attack, right?
Okay.
Great bass player. They'd use like this in-between position, right?
Yeah, so both pickups on.
Both pickups on, and pretty much at the same level. Bridge pickup, both. There's this kind of magic, this beautiful...
Yeah, it's deeper at the low end and richer at the top end as well.
Yeah, and that's my kind of default kind of go-to thing. It's like both pickups on, and you can do a lot with it. It sounds great for finger stuff. If I roll the highs off. Very smooth, a lot of mids in there. Dig in, you can do the flea thing. That kind of thing. It just sounds great.
Yeah.
And then, so you'd hear that a lot, and then the other sound, front pickup or neck pickup. you know. Should it be F? You know, it's got that really like rootsy kind of old school vibe, you know.
We were talking about blocking earlier, and the style I use a lot when I play bass is palm muting near the bridge.
Yeah. Going back to something I said earlier about round wound strings, right? So you can go from to, or if I switch pickups, and then if I enhance that by like rolling the highs off here, it's a very vintage kind of sound.
Because you see a lot of bass players, even from that era, using pieces of foam right near the bridge, don't you? Like pushing them in here.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this bass. Now, you've owned more basses than I think I've ever seen in my life.
I was being taught by a guitar player called Gary Boyle. I didn't have a lot of lessons, but the stuff he was showing me was like scale stuff like this, right? And he was showing me that 1 finger per fret thing. And of course I could do it, but it just always felt like you were having to move a bit and stuff. And on this short scale, which this is, by the way, you know, it's all there. You know, you don't have to, and I was like, that's good, isn't it? You know, right? And so it just kind of stuck with me, right? It was like, there's something there. There's something going on. Stanley Clarke played in the 70s an active alembic bass, right? Which was short scale. But that had all the bells and whistles. It had active electronics and really amazing pickups and all the clarity you wanted and everything, you know, like a 2-octave neck and all that stuff, but way beyond the reach of like my budget anyway, you know, and most people's, quite frankly. I just always thought if I ever see something that kind of fits the bill, you know, that has all that stuff that the alembic had, but not at alembic prices, I'm having it, you know, that's my bass. And there is more to the story than this, but eventually I decided to make it happen, you know, just make that bass exist.
Yeah, because we did a gig together and you just got your Brian Eastwood.
Yeah.
For the first SWB-1.
Yeah.
Which is this design.
Yeah.
And it was all your design, wasn't it? You put all this together.
All the measurements and completely. I kind of crudely, you know, drew the thing out, sketched it out. I figured, and through experience, just my experience, especially with P basses actually, they do the opposite, right? So you've got like one half of the pickup here and one half back here nearer the bridge, right? Now, obviously it works, but to my ears, it's definitely a thing. It has to be. It's laws of physics, right? That these two strings sound kind of fatter because if you move a pickup this way, you'll know that it sounds thicker and fatter, right? And these two strings sound slightly thinner, slightly more middly, right? That seems back to front. Sorry, Leo. Seems back to front to me, right? You know, these already sound fat because they're lower in pitch and stuff, right? So if anything, I want these two to be fattened up, like, you know? So that's the idea of the angled pickup. It's to kind of like help these lower notes or these lower strings be more focused and not too, you know, boomy and whatever. And the higher strings to just be a little bit warmer, a little bit fatter. So, and my original bass actually had, don't laugh folks at home, had a whammy bar on it.
Yeah, you had the Kayla bass drum, didn't you?
Yeah, which is a lot of fun, but we'll not get into that. This is kind of one of those happy accidents where I really wanted more space in between them. It just wasn't possible without sacrificing these, right? So that was the only bit of the design that was a little bit, well, let's see what happens. Obviously, you know, it didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't believe, for a start, the difference between the three pickup positions. What I mean is the bridge, both, and this. Let me just do the two extremes, right? Check it out. This is bridge, neck. I mean,
huge.
It's mad. You know, And I think it's a greater difference than you expect because the whole thing is short.
Yeah, because it's more condensed.
Exactly. It's the in-between thing. It's that. Right?
Yeah, because that's got all the clarity of a great jazz bass.
Yeah, and yet it doesn't sound like a jazz. It's very unique. That's, you know, and if, I don't know if I've ever really said this, for the first couple of minutes, I was a bit disappointed. I was like, oh, thought it might sound a bit more like Marcus Miller, that, you know. But then I started playing it and going, well, it sounds flipping awesome though. Like once I let go of that and just listen to it, and it's a real signature kind of sound. I think much more than these. That's jazz bridge, that's P bass, but that it's a real signature sound.
And moving forward, you then decided to take the SWB-1 and have it manufactured in China.
That's right, yeah.
Because
Because
that was all under your name and your own volition at the time.
it was. And I thought it'd be really cool to produce a bass that they can buy now and they can just keep playing forever. It's a professional instrument. It will do the job. So I think I had to get like 12 pre-orders to be able to get them made. I think it was like a minimum of 12.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I got 40 pre-orders in within like a few days. I was like, what's happening, you know? And then that just kind of kept going. And I think in 12 months, just on my own, I did about 140 of them, you know?
Wow.
And every single one of those went through, you know, came into my little studio, and I personally set it up and, you know, put the strings on and all the rest of it. But it was too much, you know, like doing that and teaching and being a husband and touring. I couldn't keep it up, you know.
And that's when Chowney took it over. And now you have a couple of different models with Chowney, don't you? So
that's it. The finish is just outstanding. You know, they really
hardware's
did amazing.
solid.
These were made in India, and they did an amazing job, you know.
Scott and I have known each other an awful long time, probably over 20 years now.
Yeah.
And you know, I used to go and watch Scott play in bands when I was 13, 14 years of age.
Yeah.
And you've always been inspiring to me as a musician. We've worked a lot together on sessions over the years.
We have,
and you've taught me an awful lot, and you've been a great friend to me. So thank you so much, Scott, for that, and thank you for coming in today.
Absolute pleasure.
And also, where can these good people find you online? You've got a great bass channel on YouTube.
On YouTube, just search for Scott Whitley Bass Lessons, or like YouTube/Scott Whitley Bass Lessons.
Yeah.
It's the same handle on Facebook and Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've got a slap bass course that's going to be coming out soon.
Yes, yeah.
It might even be out by the time you see this.
It might be, yeah.
And if there is, I will put a link in the description of the video.
That's going to be the main sort of work for this year. Yeah, so yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching this video all the way through to the end. If you've enjoyed watching, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's the best thing you can do to support the channel and me making more of these videos. If you want to make a further contribution, please consider checking out the super thanks function below. Like the video, leave a note in the comments and let me know who you'd like me to interview next, and I'll catch you very soon.